lot of money into Baton Rouge to shut this program down. They are now in the process of doubling the cutoff limits from 25 microrankin an hour to 50 microrankin an hour cutoff for regulatory limits, and also going up from 5 picocuries per gram as the standard to 30 picocuries per gram. What's going on now is that the EPA essentially has refused to do anything about it. We're now discovering this material in Texas. They estimate there are about 200,000 radium sites in Texas. Oil has been produced. There are radium waste sites all over these states. Now, I'm almost finished. The DEQ, the guy that was going out and actually making these people do something about it, his name was Richard Bracken. As soon as he busted these people, he got the axe, and he's now been transferred, and basically the NORM program is doing absolutely nothing right now. So if any of you know anybody with the DEQ or any legislators, please let them know that you'd like Mr. Bracken return to the program and you'd like to see aggressive enforcement for NORM.
Thank you, and Stuart did an outstanding job for me at the legislature. He did a presentation where they asked him these questions. He blew them away, really. If we didn't have had Stuart there, some other folks, we wouldn't have had any NORM regulations at all. Wilma, everybody else, they were so invaluable. Thank you, Stuart. And so maybe Stuart can help us coordinate the work about NORM, so get in touch with Stuart or myself, okay? Now, Barbara, you had something you want to share real quickly?
Yes, I wanted to let everybody know that the parish of St. Tammany has now banned the use of herbicides on its rights of way. It's only taken us about 5 active years since 1988, but we've been working on it since 1979. And we've had to get Mr. Odom to approve of this, but I think that those parishes or cities who have their own charter form of government have now got Supreme Court decision that will uphold their ability to ban their own pesticide, to make their own pesticide banning laws. So if you want to talk to me later, I'll give you whatever information I have.
Congratulations, Barbara. Linda, do you have something you want to share with us, please?
I'd just like to make one more announcement while everybody's together. We have a national lupus survey and a national childhood cancer and chronic illness survey. Please don't leave the conference without coming and getting some of them for your community, pass them in your community, and then send them back to EHN. This will be the first time any of these national statistics might be gathered in one place. So please come and get some of these surveys, and if you can't afford to make copies and pass them out to people, call EHM, tell us how many you need, and we'll send you a bunch of them. Thank you.
Mary Fauché is the new director of Louisiana Coalition for Tax Justice. And did a wonderful job in Belle Chase, and so we welcome her into the movement as a professional. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'll be as brief as possible. The Louisiana Coalition for Tax Justice is beginning our lobbying on the Board of Commerce and Industry members. This board is comprised of several people. We have a flyer in the hallway. Please do not leave without picking this up. This board has been known for rubber stamping tax exemptions for companies that pollute our environment and our communities. They get exempted where schools and public services do not have revenues in their communities in our state. And we are paying not only health effects, but other things that we are not being provided with. There is a company called Rubicon that will be on the agenda, the steering committee, in October. And what the Louisiana Coalition wants to do is work with individuals and groups where we can lobby these individual members that may live in your area, Shreveport, New Iberia, Lake Charles, New Orleans. What we'd like to do is get together and talk to these people individually and let them know that as environmentalists that we do not agree, we oppose tax exemptions to be given to major polluters, that they should be giving something back. Middle to low-income communities, taxpayers, are subsidizing the wealthiest corporations in this country and in the world, and it's time that this is stopped. We had an environmental scorecard. Governor Edwards, I think it was his second day in office, got rid of it. Now the Board of Commerce is I think, confused as to how they can deny these permits. They do have the obligation and they have the authority. And so what I'm asking you to do is help work with us. We want to hear from you. You can call the office. Also, please pick up the leaflet that we have outside on one of the tables that will give you some more information. And keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. We do well know we have to fight on our issues from every angle, and the Tax Coalition brings us a very important tool, a very important resource to us. And Kay and Chris and Mary and Brian Miller, who's also a new staff member somewhere around here. We welcome you also. There he is. Thank you,
Mary.
They do great work. Gary?
Yes, you can't pronounce that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's two O's.
Oh, and another new gentleman. I'm sorry.
My name's Gary Gresh. I'm Director of the Alliance for Affordable Energy in New Orleans. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that the Fairness Doctrine, which is the doctrine which allows balance on getting messages out about environmental problems that we may have or any other problems that we may have, is now in the U.S. legislature. It's gone through the U.S. Senate. It's now in the House of Representatives. It's H.R. 1985. Everyone needs to understand how important this is. In 1986, they rescinded the Fairness Doctrine, and those of you who were activists before that time understand how important that is. Broadcast licenses that television and radio stations have do not mean they own that broadcast frequency. The broadcast frequency is in the public domain. This is your broadcast frequencies. With a Fairness Doctrine, it requires that stations take your point of view into account. Doesn't mean you're going to get equal time. If this gets passed, it will mean that you will have an opportunity to discuss environmental issues or other issues that can be now dominated by the Freeport McMorans, by the Jack Kings of the world, and that we, in the environmental community, we need to understand that this is important. So please give them a call and let them know that you support the Fairness Doctrine. Thank you. H.R. 1985, and it's Senate Bill 333.
Gary, for the rest of the day. We have one
I
more.
have information about it out there.
Okay, right. So see him out there in the hall, please. We have one more announcement, then we're going to get to our very honored speaker here, Steve. He's been very patient. Hasn't even eaten, bless his heart. This is Zach Gray.
My name is this on? This one? Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Zach Smith, and this is Greg Altazan. Right now, we and our wives are being sued by someone who is very rich and powerful. We're being sued for, 1, speaking out at public meetings, 2, writing letters to various officials, 3, making officials take actions against the man's company. That was, in my opinion, and I have to say in my opinion because I'll get in trouble otherwise, destroying streams where we live. And I'm being sued for not giving away some of my property so he'd have a more convenient way to get where he was going. I'm not making that up either. Why am I worried about this? It's a frivolous lawsuit. We all know that. Court won't let them get away with it. Constitution protects me. If you all believe this firmly and you feel safe because of it, then I would strongly ask you to consider finding out how you might help us now, because we need help. We believe that there are 2 justice systems in existence. Again, it's my opinion. One of them is the regular system that we all know about. The second one is a political justice system that revolves around who has what influence, money, power, connections. Right now, that system has got us. We would like to move on to the next system, but we have to escape this one first. And the only way we can escape is if we can afford the ticket out. That's what they're counting on. They have unlimited resources, and we don't. We made the easiest targets, and we lose It'll be easier for them to get you, because if the Constitution doesn't work for us, it certainly will not do you any good. So I think we need to do something right now, not just for me, but you won't be able to have these things anymore if people find out they can sue you for coming and talking and complaining. The guys on that videotape in there didn't say they believed that pesticides were poisoning them. They said they were poisoning them. And we've been saying we believed and we thought, and it was our opinion for a long time, and we're being sued for it. So I'll ask you to read the Lean newsletter out there for some more details. There's a yellow sheet that says SLAP on the top. Get one of those too. Good luck to everybody.
Show them our support. They're having a really hard struggle. And Ann Williams, who was also sued for $2 million, Ann, maybe you could give them a little encouragement and support in this fight. I have one more little housekeeping duty, and then we're going to go on. This event is made possible through foundations and members and wonderful folks like yourself who help us. This year we asked for scholarships for some of the folks who feel that this work is pretty draining emotionally and financially, and it's not always easy to come up with the money to attend the events that we would like. So we want to publicly thank our members that have supported the scholarship program this year. And we had Stuart Smith, Lou Greiner, Marietta Haar, William Fontenot, Bob and Lorena Pospisil, Stephen Tellis, Joel Waltzer, and Nadine Russell. And we're deeply grateful because you've made this conference available for other people, and we thank you. Okay, now to a very honored guest, but Clara Baudouin wanted the honor of introducing you, Steve, so, and then you're ready, okay? There's music coming? Sure, thank you so much for telling us. Oh boy, we'll be right back.
I feel very honored to introduce our next speaker. He is Mr. Steve Cochran. He's a policy analyst with the Office of Air and Radiation with the U.S. EPA in Washington, D.C. Steve used to live in Louisiana. He was extremely effective and often thought of as Governor Roma's right-hand man. Louisiana lost him to Washington, D.C., but he hasn't forgotten us, and he has returned to join us this weekend. He is a great friend of the environmentalists, and we feel fortunate to have him with us today. Steve.
Clara, I hope you outlive me so that if anybody's going to give a eulogy, you can give it for me. Let me say a couple of things first. One, it is which you cannot know unless you've left. It's wonderful to come back, even for a short period of time. And I hope that we can continue to collaborate this way. This is a great scam. EPA actually pays me to come down here. So far as we can keep that working, I'll be happy. Two, I want to say thanks to some other people who are here, which are part of my family. When I was down here in Louisiana the last time, I'm from here originally, but I've moved in and out. I met somebody and ended up marrying them, which I did in December of last year, and she predates my involvement in environmental issues by, I think she was involved beginning with her birth, as far as I can tell. So Vicki Arroyo is here with me, as are her parents here on the front, so I wanted to thank them for coming with me. I'm sorry, Vicki Arroyo Cochran. That's her. I'm in the dubious position of being here as a speaker and working for the Environmental Protection Agency. And those of you who have dealt with the agency over the years and been a part of or suffered from their failures, either of judgment or commitment, understand what I say when I say that. And I would love to be able to tell you that because more Louisianians are working in the agency now, which they are, largely as a result of the results of the last election. I would also like to be able to tell you that because there is a new administration in Washington which has rhetorically committed to changing the examples of the last 12 years in terms of how EPA interacts with citizens and how EPA deals with issues. I would like to be able to tell you that at least those two things mean that the world will be much, much better tomorrow than it has been and even than it is today. And you know as well as do I that I can't in good conscience make that kind of broad commitment. I can tell you though that that because of the work that you have been doing, because of the understandings that those of us who are still working on the same side, even though we work for the agency, those of us who have learned from you about the importance of these issues, that you have an increasing voice in Washington at the national level anyway. And I hope you will take advantage of that and use us where you can and when you can, and make sure that you know how to get in touch with us. And you can always, if you're looking for me, call Lean, or if you're looking for Maureen O'Neill, who would not blanch at all with me using her name here as well. Those of you who have been in touch know how. Those of you who haven't, please do. Unfortunately, that's almost the best that I can offer you today in terms of the agency's ability to deal with the issues that most of us are so concerned about, because it has not been for a long time the focus of the agency to make sure that citizens have an opportunity to be heard, that citizens' concerns are a part of the mix, that people who live along the fence line are the people who determine policy, not those who are inside the plants. It will take some time for that to change, and I am hopeful but not euphoric about having a new administration and having the opportunity for these arguments to be made a little more clearly. What I wanted to do today was, given the state of affairs as we know it, was to give you a sense of how I think from the year or so that I've been in Washington at the agency, how you can best make it work for you. And then I'd like to wrap up with a sense of more broadly, I think, the role that you here in Louisiana play, and those of you who understand these issues from a personal level play. And if I can offer some encouragement to keep on doing the things that you've been doing. I included in the packet that was handed out a series of Xeroxes that will tell you the state of formal approach to citizen issues that exist in Louisiana at EPA. I pulled out my phone book and Xeroxed things so that we would have information to distribute to you here today. What it has is a chart, a management chart of EPA at the national level, and behind that is a chart of EPA at the regional level in Region 6, and then behind that is a listing of telephones and addresses and fax numbers listed by responsibility of the people who are in charge of issues at Region 6. So you should use that when you want to try to get in touch with somebody or when you want to target somebody. The most difficult thing that I know when I worked in the advocacy community down here, and I still find it up there, the most difficult thing to do when you're trying to deal with EPA is to target your efforts, is to know where to go, who to talk to, and not have to go through the 20 to 50 phone call routine of trying to pin down who can give you some kind of information. The very best advice that I can give you right now is to make sure that you begin, if you haven't, to develop relationships with the people that you do talk to on the telephone, whether it be me in Washington. If you call me, Charlie Ellis will tell you this, if you call me in Washington and say, Steve, we've got a problem and I'd really like your help on it, most of the time, unless it's an area that I deal specifically with, the best I can do is to say, is to get a sense of what the issue is and then try to find out for you within the agency who it is that would be dealing with these issues. There are about 20,000 people who work for EPA now, spread out all across the country. At some distance, as you know, from day in and day out life on the fence line. So the very best that I can do is to try to target your information to make sure that the people who eventually will make decisions about your concerns hear directly from you. But we're not set up formally to do that. I did have a conversation, which a way of providing some hope as I came down here with, I work in the air office. I had a conversation with the woman who has been designated to be the new political head of the air office. Her background is as an advocacy lawyer for the Natural Resources Defense Council. She's worked on air issues for a number of years on the right side, and I'm hopeful that she will bring a good perspective to these issues. And I asked her what she thought about public participation, about public involvement, about citizens' ability to work with the agency. And she had the right answers, and she had the right scowl on her face when I asked her about that because of her own experience, often in dealing with EPA as an institution. But she said very clearly, and I was glad that she was saying this without prompting, that she believed that the agency as an institution needed to change, that the agency as an institution needed to create specific areas within each program that were targeted to doing one thing, which is answering citizens' concerns and making sure that citizens had a formal place to go to make the agency work for them. And that was her suggestion, not mine. I think it's an awfully good idea, but I will tell you that it won't happen tomorrow regardless of how quickly we try to change things. So in the meantime, take seriously the relationships that you have, use them, and try to build new relationships where you can with the people who you get on the other end of the phone. I know as well as anybody that there's a tendency by the time you do get to the person that you want to talk to be pretty irritated or pretty frustrated. And I understand how that ends up coming across the phone to the person who's never talked to you before. And I would just suggest to you that you balance the moral outrage that is very useful with the practical aspect of human relationships, which is that you want to be able to work with this person again and again. You might just think through that and see if it'll manage your irritation a little bit. Don't lose the irritation. Just manage how it sounds on the phone. The second thing, I guess, that I would like to say about the agency is that, and this will focus me a little bit more on the role that you play uniquely in Louisiana. Vicki used to tell me, because Vicki worked at EPA years ago, how frustrated she would get sometimes with the discussions, especially in headquarters, about policy, about how abstract they were, about how theoretical they were. And it's interesting to me that if you go to a conference of business people, you will hear the same criticism of EPA. They will talk about how EPA doesn't understand how the real world works. They will talk about how they make these decisions without any regard for how it will impact on the business and communities, about how much it will cost. I mean, you know the litany. You've heard the discussions. Well, the same thing is true. I wish I didn't have to tell you this, but you know it. The same thing is true on the environmental side. There is a sense often that these discussions occur not devoid of facts, because these are very intelligent people, well-trained, well-schooled, but they've not lived on the fence line, and they don't come to it with the kind of heart and understanding that, unfortunately, all of you in this room naturally have. The thing that you can bring to the debate more than anything else is that sense of what life is really like. That is not easy to do, and it's especially not easy to do when most of the people that you're dealing with are very analytical and in fact shy away from the kind of emotional reaction that they get when they come to public hearings down here. When you talk to people who are in the process of having to prepare for a public hearing from EPA's perspective, you find again and again that they don't want to do it. They don't want to come here. They don't want to hear what is going to be said. Not because they don't think citizens have a right to do it. Most believe that. Not because they don't think that what you will say will be important, but because as a human, it's no fun to sit for 4 or 5 hours and get beat up. And that's mostly what happens in these hearings, because people get so frustrated by the time EPA gets here that they're ready to unload. I've done some unloading. I understand that. I think it's a very healthy thing to do, and I would not suggest not doing it when EPA comes down here. I'm telling you that that's the kind of dynamic that works. But I will also tell you that as we try to struggle through some of those human and institutional issues, that I'll use an example specifically right here. As many of you know, at the request of activists in Louisiana, the EPA agreed to do what they almost never do, which is to have a hearing outside of Washington about an issue that affected people outside of Washington. And they came down and they had a hearing on an air toxics rule here in Louisiana in Baton Rouge. We were able, because of being able to present some of the arguments, some people from Louisiana, Florence Robinson and Willie Fontenot and others came up and spoke to the people in the air office and said, you know, you really ought to come down here, and you ought to come down at as high a level as possible so that you really can be informed about what we're concerned about. And it was persuasive. And so the person who at the time was the head of Air for America came down here and sat in Baton Rouge and listened for close to 5 hours to people tell their real stories about how life is down here. And then the next day, with the help of Mary Lee and Willie and others, he was taken around and shown the communities where these facilities live. Now, in this particular case, this one fella happened to grow up in New Jersey, so he knew what a chemical plant was. It wasn't new to him, but even having grown up there, he told me later he had never seen anything like this. He had never seen the breadth and the size of facilities. It was all brand new to him. This is the guy who's in charge of Air for America. But he learned one other thing, and I think which is what you bring to the discussions. When we, after him chairing that hearing for as long as he did, we got back in the car as we were leaving, and he just looked at me, and you've seen the look from other people when you've taught them for the first time something, and he just looked over and went, "This is real important to these people, isn't it?" There's a light bulb going on here. But then he went on to say, and it's what's true, he said, you know, for us, and this is what made me feel good about what you had done, he said, for us it's so abstract. It's one decision, and then we have to make the next decision, and then we're looking at California, and then we're looking at Kansas, and we just go on and on. He said, I think this is really important. Now that, I was glad to hear that, but I'm skeptical enough at this point in my existence to say, yeah, well, we made that first step. Now what? We've got some decisions that are going to be made in this rule along the way. So I've been very, very careful and being watched very carefully the decision process on this particular rule. And what this same person said, this final decision is not made yet. Gee, it's only been 6 or 7 months. You wouldn't expect things to happen that quickly. This person has been a very strong proponent for what those of you who are familiar with this Hahn rule know is averaging, which means basically being able, a facility within its fence lines being able to trade for the purposes of emission reductions, one chemical for another, one emission for another. And the way the proposal came out of the previous administration, that trade could be made without regard for toxicity. So you could, in fact, trade under the original proposal. And the way we've described it at EPA is a pound of windshield wiper fluid for a pound of Iraqi nerve gas. And it wouldn't matter. A pound is a pound without regard for its impact. It's pretty easy for us who've been out in the community to understand why that's not such a good idea. But in the discussions that occur in the abstract and theoretical nature of what a good program is, often what you find are arguments coming back that say, well, on a national scale, because of the protections that we have built into this rule, notice these caveats all the way down the line, we don't find that it will cause any additional emissions or any additional toxicity. We can't demonstrate that it will. So the logical step for many people is therefore, because you can't show that it will, therefore it won't. Very bad logic, but the logic that sometimes rules. So this particular person who came down here and heard people in Louisiana talk about the Hahn and talk about averaging, went into those discussions very much a proponent of averaging in a theoretical basis. And what he said the other day in these discussions, and I'm sure I shouldn't tell you this, but what he said the other day was that he was no longer comfortable and in fact would not recommend to the administrator a rule under which any scenario could be drawn that would increase risk. Any. Now, that's a fundamental change. But that's because no other influence, honestly. That is because of what people here said and did on that night in March when they had 1,000 other things to do. So while I would like to be able to tell you that the world is changing overnight and we will become non-institutionalized and you will be able to get in touch with whoever you need to and we'll know who that person is and that'll all happen tomorrow, what I can tell you is that what you've been doing is making a difference, and it's making a difference on a positive side. And I can also tell you that you have friends in Washington. We're working on friends in Dallas. We've got to get some more appointments there. And we will continue to do the little things that we can do to try to make it easier for you to do the big things that you do. I also want to say, though, and head back in one other direction, that before coming down here, I wanted to see how Louisiana was doing, and if they were making progress in using Jerry Poget's definition of progress. I wanted to see what it was, and what is clear as you look at the large numbers, and I'll use TRI data because it's one of the measurements that we use that's becoming more useful. What you see is that the numbers have come down broadly. What you see is that the pressure that has come from understanding what's actually being emitted, the comparison of this state against other states, there's not a lot of confusion about what number one means. The pressure that's come from that has actually resulted in reductions, and that's very good. And I think everyone should be commended for that. But I also know that when progress is made, it is often used as an argument against further progress. We've made a lot of progress. We've spent a lot of money. You hear these arguments every day. And the subtext is, therefore, we don't need to do any more. Get off our back. We've made bigger reductions than anybody in America. We spent $260 million this year. And so they try to change the benchmark. They try to say, look how much we've done against our own record. And we all know how poor that record was. So I would encourage you to not lose the comparative nature of this discussion, because there is still no reason why anyone in Louisiana should suffer any additional pollution than anyone else in America is getting. There is no reason at all. Let me read you just a real quick list of what came out of a quick scan of the TRI data for Louisiana. The latest data that's available for the toxic release inventory is 1991. Louisiana had 4 of the top 10 TRI facilities with the greatest increases in releases between 1990 and 91. 4 of the top 10, 40% of America right here. You'll recognize the names. Agrico, St. James, Agrico, Uncle Sam, BASF, Geismar, Arcadian, Geismar. No big surprises there. We also have the largest number of facilities in the top 50 greatest increases. There are 7. We're number 1. The list includes the facilities I just listed, along with marine shale processors, Gaylord Container in Bogalusa, Georgia Pacific in Zachary. These are the companies that are in the top 50 increases in releases. Now, we've talked about how progress is being made, how reductions are occurring. Not for these people. We have 3 of the top 10 facilities with the largest releases overall, period. More releases than any facilities in America. Number 1, American Cyanamid in West Wego. Number 2, Agrico in St. James. Number 6, Agrico in Uncle Sam. We've got the 2nd largest number of facilities in the top 50 largest releases. Add the companies I just said, along with Arcadian and Geismar, along with BASF and Geismar, along with Uniroyal in Geismar, and along with Citgo in Lake Charles. I'm going to make sure we have equal coverage here for the state. We had the facility in Louisiana, according to TRI data, that had the largest, greatest increases to air in 1991, marine shale processors. They went up faster and further than anybody else in America. Not to worry.
Aren't they recycled?
They're recycled. That's right. We had the facility with the greatest increases to water in 1991, Agrico. You know, it doesn't rain anyplace else where they have fertilizer factories. I thought I would tell you that. We had the facility with the second greatest underground injection increases in America, BASF in Geismar. And the last thing that you know better than do I, but really stands out even worse, it's one thing to do it to ourselves, it's another to encourage others to do it to us. We're third in the receipt of TRI chemicals from out of state. So I am absolutely sure that progress has been made. I'm not saying that facetiously, it's true. But don't ever let it be used in a manner that says we don't have a long way to go and we don't have a lot of progress that has to be made. These numbers ought not be here, and they're continuing to be here. I want to, I think, close with something I'm never sure what to say at these things, and I'm sure not sure what to say to you people. But I think that my understanding of what you bring to the debate is colored by my own experience down here and by my understanding of what often doesn't exist in Washington. And so I was I'm never sure what to say, so it's always useful to look for other people's words. And I found a Nobel address by William Faulkner, who got the Nobel Prize in 1950, and he talked about what writers do, and he talked about the desire not just to endure, but to prevail. And it seemed to me that a definition of an activist, a definition of the people in this room, are people who at some point along the way, for whatever individual reason, decided not just to endure, but to prevail. And I think if you are able to continue to do that, I know personally, and I know other people who know more personally in this room, that this is not necessarily a culture in this state that rewards things that you do. I think the previous speaker will give you that sense very clearly if you haven't had it lately. But you're in the process, and I want to quote William Faulkner here, of creating out of the materials of the human spirit something which did not exist before. That's true in terms of a better Louisiana, one that has less pollution, that doesn't have the kind of list that I just read. But it's also true in terms of the human impact you're having on people who are making decisions not only about you, but about America. But because of what you do and how you do it, you are doing that. And I personally, as a Louisianian who happens to live outside of Washington for a while, I want to say thank you for that. Thank you for letting me come here, and I hope I can continue to come. Thanks. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have a Louisiana to Washington question. Probably everybody's run into at some point. The EPA has delegated to the DEQ the authority to do what it does, issue permits, judge on what's going on in this state. I have lately found the DEQ is not following its own guidelines. It's not following its own rules and regulations. And I've turned to the EPA to say, who's responsible for keeping the DEQ in line? And they go, we don't know. They won't do it. Where is the chain of command? How do we even get our own state to do what it says it's going to do?
All right. Two quick answers.
Steve, we couldn't hear the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me ask also, what time is it?
5 minutes late.
Are we? Okay. That's what I was afraid of. Yeah, that's right. It's all your fault, Mary. The question was basically when, in this particular case, it has to do with permit delegation, but the question is when DEQ is not doing its job, who do you talk to? What's the chain of command? How do you get EPA to do its oversight job? The first answer is that oversight is a specific responsibility of EPA. So even if the person that you talk to says that their particular responsibility does not include that, broadly, oversight responsibility of all these programs that have been delegated from the federal level are indeed centered at EPA. So though you may not target the first time the right place, there is somebody who is required to oversee that. Number two, that will be a specific case-by-case basis. And so I'm at a position right now of being able to take the fallback position, and you and I have already talked about this particular case, but of saying the only thing I can suggest anytime this kind of thing comes up is to call who you know or call somebody who you can ask exactly who it is that you should be talking to, and then you have to begin the process. Now, there are two processes involved. One is that direct discussions with EPA people, and the second is the political discussion that has to do with the kind of media generation of the things that you do and do pretty well here, and also has to do with, in the cases where you can get people on board, some of the political support that makes people at EPA wake up and answer questions a little more quickly. So I would continue to use those political routes whenever you can. I also know that many of those political routes are often shut off in the process because you're asking questions that people don't want to have answered. So let me tell you one other quick thing, which is institutionally you should know that EPA is designed in a very odd way. The regions are divided into different types of divisions than its headquarters. So though I work in the Office of Air and Radiation, the people in Dallas who work on air issues also work on pesticides issues. Well, the person who works on pesticides issues in Washington is a completely separate, different part of the agency than I'm in. I mean, it's an unusual set of it's not the way you would draw it in management school, let's put it that way. The second thing is that the regional appointee process, as you know, when somebody is appointed to be head of Region 6, for example, that is a person who answers to who appointed him or her, not to the person who runs the air office at EPA, and not generally, honestly, although the management scheme will tell you that's who they're supposed to report to, not necessarily to the head of EPA. They are beholden, this is a real world discussion here, they are beholden for their jobs to whoever appointed them, which has, this has become an apocryphal story, and I wasn't there, so I don't know who else was there, but I will tell you that the story, I think, is true, that a Region 6 administrator, once being asked to follow the lines of the White House on a particular area, said, well, excuse me, but my job came from Senator Graham, and whatever Senator Graham wants is what I'll do. Now, whether that's completely true or not, I don't know, but I think it's damn true, honestly. And so that sets up a dynamic where you're not always sure who reports to who, and it's a very political situation. It is not a good management system, and the result of that is the kind of inequity you get where you have one region who does a bang-up job on issues, and you have another region who does a terrible job on issues. Those regions tend to reflect the political culture, political climate, much more so than you wish they would. That puts a premium on, in my judgment, working with the staff, the career people who are there every day to work their way through the system, because they know what the bosses want, and if they don't want that, honestly, they also have ideas now of how to get around those things. So it puts a premium on trying to build those relationships with staff people who you can build some trust with. It's not easy to do, but then nothing that you guys do is easy to do. So call me, call Maureen, and we'll go from there. Yes, sir.
Is Martha Madden being offered a position at EPA?
It's only the river Martha started.
Boy, I don't know. I would be. There are some people who are awfully good at starting rumors. There are some people who are good at capitalizing on rumors, but I have seen in the appointee discussion there. I'll give a separate story. There is a particular judge in New Orleans who did not stand a ghost of a chance of being appointed to anything by the Clinton administration. But he successfully started a rumor which said that he had been offered a particular job, but he had turned it down. Now think about that. Nobody can confirm that. Nobody can deny it. He gets the benefit, if anybody believes him, of thinking that he has in with the Clinton administration, and there's no harm done. So those kind of things happen. You'll hear a lot of rumors about a lot of people in this process. I would be very surprised had that occurred. But it's not something that is part of what I do every day. So there are a lot of things that go on. The rumors that I've heard about Region 6 have varied. but they're all still rumors at this point. There's some sense that because Clinton's from Arkansas, the appointee would be from Arkansas. There's another sense that because Texas is important politically, even though they have 2 Republican senators, they need to have somebody from Texas who can make sure that they're in sync with Texas in some of their decisions. So there's a lot of that going on. I hadn't heard anything in that direction. Yeah. Yes, sir.
In your discussions or in your life in Washington, you get a feel for what the international policies are for the third world as it develops, or as these companies in the United States tiptoe out to develop their chemical operations outside the United States. Is there any pressure from the federal government or EPA dealing with policy to have them clean up their act as they develop?
The main place where that issue is really on the burner right now, as you're aware, is the NAFTA discussions, the whole discussion about what does an international trade agreement mean in terms of other countries being able to use lower environmental standards or lower labor standards as a competitive advantage against us in this country who try to have higher standards. And that's been there's a whole side agreement to NAFTA that's being negotiated to try to deal with those. My own sense is that in those discussions, the people who are driving those discussions are not environmental people but are trade people, and they would just as soon that the environmental issue go away. They're not sitting there really trying to solve the environmental problem. They're trying to do it in a way that will take some of the political heat off of the other decisions. But the international environmental discussions tend to be related to trade issues, not to the broader issue of equity relative to the world and pollution. So,
well, we in Louisiana, particularly in Calcasieu Parish, would face a great influx of imported waste, intercontinental waste into Louisiana if that treaty is approved at a chemical waste management site there in Carlos. So it has a direct impact as to the toxic release inventory numbers you referred to, and what this state becomes or continues to become a dumping ground for the world. The impact,
that's a good point. That's a good point. I wish I had a better answer for you right now, but that's pretty much how they look at it. No. And I've been around for a while.
Yeah, Steve, Steve. Pam Neville, could you come forward, please? Pam, are you still in here? Where's Pam? Is Pam Neville here? Pam, could you come forward? These things don't always run as smooth as we would like, right? That's why you see all these notes and me running up and down, and there's music playing, and I don't have the lights right, and I've forgotten what I was supposed to do, and all those kind of wonderful things. But we're still smiling. And one of the things I forgot was Pam Neville's one of our activists who I love very much, who I slighted, because I did know, among other things besides being an activist in her own community and a frog lady because she loves frogs, she's going to be our reverend. She was supposed to start our meal with a prayer. So we're going to end our meal with a prayer. So is that all right with everybody? Yes! Thank you, Pam. I'm sorry.
Maybe the last word is better than the first word.
There you go.
Maybe we could just bow our heads, and I'd like to say, thank the Almighty Power for all who are present. Look upon us as a channel to bring about environmental justice. Please make this food and knowledge nourish our mind, body, and spirit. Remember, plant a seed and watch yourself grow. And don't forget to take a look at what you've created.
I don't want to say anything else. Wasn't that beautiful? Okay, let's carry that in our hearts and spirits. But also I want to remind you, we're going to have the Scott Welch Award at the end of the day, and it's a surprise. It's someone in this room, and they don't know. We're also presenting 2 other awards, and it's a surprise, and they don't know. So you got to stay around. We're also going to have a wonderful 8-piece band. Everybody's going to dance. We're going to have hors d'oeuvres and drinks and a really great time. But right now, we're going to go to the next room and hear a wonderful speaker, Dr. Paul Conant. Thanks, everybody.